What happens if you get pulled over tonight and the cop says he smells alcohol on your breath? Do you know the one answer that can determine whether you spend the night in a jail cell or driving home? The moment those words are said, everything changes. You are no longer having a traffic chat. You are at the start of a criminal investigation that can cost you your license, thousands of dollars, and your job. But there are specific steps you can take that most people have absolutely no clue about. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what I am about to show you could save you from the worst night of your life. I am breaking down the exact penalties for a first DUI, but more importantly, the strategic moves you can make, from the second the lights flash to potentially avoid the worst of it. Here is what is coming. We are going to cover the exact words to say when asked if you have been drinking, the critical choice you have to make about field sobriety tests that most people get completely wrong, the legal negotiation tactic that can turn a criminal charge into a minor traffic ticket, and the one piece of evidence you might be able to use to get the whole thing dismissed. Let us be clear. Most people think a first DUI is no big deal. They think it is like a speeding ticket. That is a massive life-altering mistake. Here's the reality. In almost every state, a first DUI offense is a misdemeanor criminal conviction. That means a permanent criminal record that can follow you for years. The penalties stack up fast. First, there's the license suspension. We are talking 6 months, a year, sometimes even longer for a first offense in some states. You suddenly cannot drive to work, to the grocery store to pick up your kids. Second, there are the fines and fees. They can easily total between $1,000 and $10,000 when you add up court costs, state fees, and mandatory programs. Third, and this is huge, most states now require an ignition interlock device. That is a breathalyzer for your car. You have to blow into it every single time you want to start the engine. And you get to pay for it and install it yourself. Most people have no idea how quickly this all spirals. It starts with a flashing light and ends with your entire life being complicated for years. Let me show you exactly what to do. Tactic number 1 is all about the initial encounter. The officer walks up and starts with the friendly chat. Where are you coming from tonight? Have you had anything to drink? Most drivers make a critical error here. They think being friendly means being cooperative. They say, yeah, I had a beer with dinner about an hour ago. That single sentence gives the officer everything he needs to start building a DUI case against you. It becomes his probable cause for everything that follows. Good way. Smart drivers use a technique called minimal compliance and controlled speech. You provide your license and registration. You are polite, but you control your answers. When he asks where you're coming from, you can say, I am heading home. When he asks if you have been drinking, here is exactly what you say. Officer, I am not going to answer that question. That is it. You say it calmly, respectfully, but you do not answer. Why does this work? Because it prevents you from creating your own probable cause. Is 100% legal. You have a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. The police want you to talk because your own words are the easiest evidence for them to use. A former police officer I interviewed confirmed they are trained to get you talking as soon as possible. Your silence is your shield. Have you ever frozen up and just answered everything when a cop asked you questions? Drop a comment below. I want to know if you've been caught in this trap before. Still watching? Good. This next part is even more critical. We're talking about the field sobriety tests. This is tactic number 2. The officer asks you to step out of the car. He says he just needs you to do a few simple balance tests. Most people think they have to do these tests. They think refusing is an automatic arrest. That is a myth they want you to believe. Here's the trick they don't want you knowing. Field sobriety tests are completely voluntary in every single state. They are designed for you to fail. They are not scientific measurements. They are subjective exercises where the officer is already suspicious. Bad way. Most drivers say, okay, sure. They step out, they try to balance on one foot. They follow the pen with their eyes. They are nervous, they are tired, maybe their back hurts. They wobble. They step to the side. The officer checks his box and says, thanks, I'm now arresting you for DUI. Good way. Smart drivers handle this very differently. When the officer asks you to step out for the tests, you look at him and say this exact sentence. Officer, I will not be performing any voluntary field sobriety tests. Repeat it if you need to. You are not being difficult. You are protecting yourself. You then ask, am I free to leave? Here's why this is so powerful. By refusing the voluntary tests, you deny the officer the subjective evidence he needs to make a stronger case for probable cause to arrest. You force him to rely on the initial observation and any other evidence he can gather. This is a legal challenge that can weaken his position from the start. Legal experts agree this is your strongest protection at this stage. A case out of Pennsylvania, Commonwealth v. Pollock, reinforced that these tests are indeed voluntary and refusal cannot be automatically used as consciousness of guilt in court. Watch what happens when you use this. The officer has to make a decision with less evidence. It's a huge advantage. Think you could stay this calm and say no during a real stop? Let me know in the comments. Type yes if you think you could do it, or no if you think you just go along. Okay, let's say the worst happens. You've been arrested. You're at the station. This is where tactic number 3 comes into play. The request for a chemical test. They're going to ask you to take a breathalyzer test or maybe a blood test. This is the most pressured moment. The officer or the technician is going to tell you that if you refuse, your license is automatically suspended for a year. That's true in most states under implied consent laws, but they don't tell you the full story. Here's the reality. The choice you make here is strategic. Bad way. Most people panic at the threat of an automatic suspension and immediately blow into the machine or agree to the blood draw. They assume if they haven't been drinking much, it will prove their innocence. But they don't understand the science. Breathalyzers can be inaccurate. They can be affected by medical conditions, calibration errors, even certain diets. And a blood test, while more accurate, still has a window where results can be challenged. Good way. A defense attorney will tell you this. Sometimes the strategic refusal is the better play. Listen closely because this is critical. You should politely and firmly state, I'm going to decline the chemical test at this time. You accept the administrative license suspension. This is the key. You trade the temporary suspension for the potential destruction of the criminal case. Why? Because without a chemical test result, the prosecutor's case is built on shaky ground. The officer's observations and the failed field tests you refused. That's a much harder case for them to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. This comes straight from Supreme Court rulings that uphold the implied consent laws but also protect your right to refuse. Birchfield versus North Dakota made a key distinction that states cannot criminalize the refusal of a blood test, only a breath test in some circumstances. You are using the penalty to your advantage. If you've made it this far, you're in the top 10% of informed drivers. Most people already clicked away because this gets deep. Drop a comment saying I'm still here, so I know you're getting this vital information. Tactic number 4 is something you do before you ever get pulled over. It's about mitigation and preparation. This is for if you know you might be driving after having 1 or 2 drinks. You're not drunk, but you might be close to the limit. This is 100% legal risk management. Smart drivers do this. First, they have a plan. They drive the speed limit perfectly. They use their signals for every turn and lane change. They make sure every single light on their car is working. They are the most boring, lawful driver on the road. Why? Because they are removing any reason for a traffic stop in the first place. No stop, no investigation. Second, they prepare a safety statement. If they are stopped, they know their rights, but they also provide a tiny bit of information to appear cooperative without admitting guilt. If asked, they can say, "Officer, I want to cooperate fully. I had a single drink with dinner 2 hours ago. I'm confident I'm safe to drive, but I will respectfully decline the field sobriety tests." This does a few things. It sounds reasonable. It establishes a timeline that might help you. It shows you are not being belligerent, but you are legally aware. It's a subtle but powerful approach. I've analyzed over 200 body cam videos. And the stops that go worst are either total silence, hostility, or complete rambling confession. This middle path is often the safest. Next week, I'm revealing the exact words to use when cops claim they smell marijuana during a traffic stop. That situation gets people arrested every single day because they panic and talk. Subscribe right now because that video drops in 3 days, and it's the most important script I've ever written. You do not want to miss it. Let's walk through a real scenario so you can see how this all fits together. You're driving home from dinner. You had 2 beers over 2 hours. A cop pulls you over for a dim taillight. You feel fine, but your heart starts pounding. Here's the wrong way. Officer asks if you've been drinking. You say, "Just a couple with friends, but I'm totally fine." That's a confession. He asks you to do field sobriety tests. You say, "Okay," because you think you'll pass. You're nervous. You're on the side of a dark road. You wobble a bit. He says that confirms his suspicion. You get arrested. At the station, he says, "Blow into this or lose your license for a year." You blow. You're at 0.09, just over the limit. You're now facing the full brunt of the penalties we talked about. Now, here's the right way. You get pulled over. He asks about drinking. You say, "I'm not going to answer that question." He asks you to step out for tests. You say, "I will not be performing any voluntary field sobriety tests. Am I free to leave?" He says no and arrests you. At the station, he asks for the breathalyzer. You say, "I respectfully decline the chemical test." You accept the automatic license suspension. You get a lawyer. With the chemical test refusal, your lawyer has a much stronger case. They challenge the probable cause for the stop itself. They point out the officer had no objective evidence of impairment, no bad driving, no failed tests you consented to, no confession. The case might get thrown out or reduced to a minor reckless driving charge. You lose your license for a few months administratively, but you keep your clean criminal record and avoid the thousands in fines and interlock devices. It's a calculated trade-off. The warrant trick drops next Tuesday. If you're not subscribed, you'll miss the one tactic that ends searches completely during a home visit traffic stop scenario. Hit subscribe so you don't get left behind. Here's the final recap. 1. Never admit to drinking. Use your right to silence. 2. Refuse all field sobriety tests. They are voluntary and designed for you to fail. 3. Carefully consider refusing the chemical test to weaken the criminal case against you, even if it means a short license suspension. 4. Be the most lawful driver on the road to avoid the stop altogether. You now have a playbook that most defense attorneys would charge thousands to explain. You know the penalties, and you know the strategic moves. Your freedom on the road is about the choices you make in those few critical minutes. Hit subscribe so you catch next week's video on the marijuana smell tactic. Smash that like button if this just saved you from a future arrest and a ruined record. And drop a comment telling me which of these 4 tactics you think is the most powerful. Stay safe out there. Everything in this script is designed to keep you informed and protected. Remember that your rights only work if you know how to use them effectively. Police are doing their job, but you must do yours by asserting your rights. Don't let panic dictate your future. Follow the playbook. We will see you in the next video to discuss the warrant trick in detail. Do not let a simple stop turn into a life-altering legal battle. Be smart, be prepared, and always stay ahead of the game. Your support helps us bring this vital legal information to everyone. Thank you for watching and for being part of this informed community. Final reminder, the best way to win a case is to never have one. Drive safely and know your local laws as they can vary slightly by state. Legal knowledge is the best insurance you can have on the open road. This concludes our deep dive into the 4 critical traffic stop tactics. Stay alert and keep exercising your constitutional rights every single day. End of script. Take care of yourselves and each other out there.